Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Just Passing Through podcast. Hello, everybody. And like a comfortable pair of shoes, I'm back in my studio. There's no outside broadcast today. I'm not in a foreign country. I'm back in Japan, and I'm back in the house in the studio. Right, so autumn is well and truly upon us. Now, all that exercise, all the stuff that I was doing to keep myself fit over the spring and the summer always comes very easy to me in good weather. Now we're getting into the business end of 2023 and it's starting to get cold. It is starting to get cold now and it's raining. So those outside podcasts that I were doing are going to be brought inside now, I think, for at least a few months. We do get the odd Indian summer here where it'll get warm again, so I will be going back out. But I think this is the first podcast back in this room since July, maybe June. But it's good to be back. Now, today, what we're going to talk about today is something that I've been doing for the last week, and it's the OMAD diet. The OMAD, O-M-A-D diet. I wouldn't say it's so much of a diet. OMAD stands for 1 meal a day. Now, for them of you who have been listening before, have heard me go on about this fasting charabang that I've been on for months and months now. Now, let me take you from the start. In May, I was 84 kilos. 84 kilos. Now, for me, over the last 10, 15 years, that's a bit high. I was trying my best to get the weight off. I was lifting, I was going cycling, but it wasn't shifting. So I thought, right, I've got to do something here. And the podcasts that I've been listening to, the people that I've been listening to were always going on about fasting. And I thought, I'm doing all sorts of stuff here. I'm cycling, I'm lifting, I'm eating right, and I still can't shift it. And I didn't want to do fasting because it was just another thing that I was going to have to do that I didn't really want to do. Straight away, my mind would go to, I'm not going to be able to do this. I like having breakfast. How am I going to get to the middle of the day without having out to eat? I've been eating breakfast more or less every day since I was born. So YouTube is a mine of information. Podcasts, ditto. Real good way of finding information. If I would have tried to do this 15, 20 years ago, there'd have been no information on it. So I started off at 16:8, which is 16 hours of no food, 8 hours eating. So I would start eating at 12 o'clock, finish at 8. And I would just eat what I normally ate in that window. And I'd still eat the same amount of stuff. Now, the thing was getting up the first morning. That first morning when I decided to do it, the following evening I stopped eating at 8 o'clock. Because I'm an old fuck now, I'm in bed at 9, half 9. We go to bed when the kids go to bed. And I'm usually bang out by 10. So I always get up at 5 o'clock, do exercise, and then while I'm working, before I go to work, I will do some kind of breakfast. I would have a healthy breakfast. It was usually a protein shake, fruit, bit of porridge. and then cycle to work. But slowly, over 8 months, I went from 78 kilos all the way up to 84. And I didn't understand why. So I thought, right, I want to cut some before the summer. So I were hearing about the fasting. I thought, well, I'll give it a go. Because there were some people online on the podcast on YouTube that were saying they couldn't shift it, and then they decided to fast. Now, I had to have my eating window from 12 till 8, because the thing with me is at night I cannot keep my feet out at pantry. I'm always going for snacking and stuff like that. So I thought, if I eat late, this is going to be easier for me. So I looked for people that were doing 12 till 8. And the best piece of advice for doing this eating window was, as soon as you wake up, whatever you're going to do, whenever you're about to eat breakfast, sit down at the table and think to yourself, are you hungry? Are you hungry? Because you're usually eating about 10 hours after you stopped eating the night before. So if you finished eating at 8, you're starting to eat again at 6. So it comes to around 6 o'clock, and I sat down and I thought, am I hungry? And I wasn't. When you sit down and ask yourself that question, you're really not. It's a timer that's been put in us where we seem to think we need to eat at that time of day every day. It's a routine. So when I spoke to myself and said, no, I'm not hungry, I didn't feel any sort of hunger. So instead of getting breakfast ready, I got what I usually drink, which is a hot black cup of coffee. I never have milk, I never have sugar. So I sat down and had a cup of coffee. So by the time I set off for work, I'd had my litre of water, I'd done my exercise, I'd done my lifting, and I think I had 2 cups of black coffee. So I get on my bike and I cycle to work. Now, once you're at work, you'll all find, once you're at work, if you are busy at work, if you're busy, and it's very important that you've got to keep yourself busy, you're not hungry because your mind is on something else. You're not thinking about when you want to eat or about wanting to eat because your mind is on the task that's in front of you. So that time of year, I was busy with other things to do. So I got through that morning quite easy. Now, lunchtime at the place where I work here in Japan starts at 12:30. So by the time I got to sit down and get everything ready for something to eat, it was 1:45. So I had nearly got to 17 hours of fasting, not 16. 16 3/4. Now, again, I sat myself down before I started eating. I thought, are you hungry? Answered back to myself, yeah, a little bit. But I thought, fuck it, I'm going to give it an extra 15 minutes and start eating at 1. So then I've got 17 hours in. And then if I do feel hungry tonight, I'll have an extra hour of eating until 9 o'clock. So I left it till 1 o'clock, and I had what I usually have, which is a natural yogurt. There's no sugar in yogurt. Banana chopped up, put in there, and 100 grams of dried raisins in the yogurt mixed up. That is what I have for my lunch every day. I've been eating healthy for such a long time that suffices me enough. It's got the protein in there and it's got the fibre in there. Now, after 17 hours of not eating, even on the first day, that yogurt tasted better than it had ever tasted in the previous 6 months. I don't know what had happened. I don't know what my taste buds were doing differently. But that food tasted sweeter. In every way, it just tasted better. So I had my black coffee and the yogurt. The coffee, again, tasted just the same because you're getting no calories from the coffee. So even if you are drinking black coffee throughout the morning, you're not breaking your fast with that because there's no calories in it. So black coffee and water is what I was on during that first morning. So I had the yogurt. Again, we're not eating for 17 hours. That yogurt made me feel fuller than I actually was. So I've given my body a rest. I've given my stomach a rest. I've given my body a chance to work on the food that I'd eaten the night before. So everything has passed through my stomach. So I then went about my business in afternoon, finished at 4, cycling home. Now, once I get home, I've got about 15 or 20 minutes to get showered off and get back out and do my evening work because I've got a lot of evening jobs dotted around my hometown of Zouch around here. So I get home, again, being busy is the key. I've got no time to be going into the kitchen, opening all cupboards and throwing snacks in. I've got no time for that. Excuse me. So straight into the shower, closing washing machine, get changed. I've got the bag packed in the morning because I thought if I don't pack that bag, I'm not going to have time to get out at the door. So I packed the bag, had the bag ready, and I go back downstairs. I had about 5 minutes. Now, when I went downstairs, because that is a trigger time for me, and I think this is where the weight were creeping on, because I'd have that 5 minutes, I'd put my bag down, waiting to go out, and then I'd go into the kitchen and just graze. Now, you got these things called senbei in Japan, which are rice crackers, all carbs, and I would just plough through them like they were going out of fashion. But this particular day, I had about 5 minutes, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to cycle to my next job, and I'm going to get there early. Now, when I cycle to these jobs, the people who I'm working for, they know that I love coffee. So there'll be a black coffee and no sugar there for me. Again, sorry about the coughing. So I arrive at the customers and I've pre-warned them, don't put any snacks out. Don't put any sugary snacks out for me. If you want to put nuts out, or dried fruit or a bit of fruit, that's fine. But no biscuits, no rice crackers, please. And that's what they did. So it was much easier when the people that you're working with or working for have this system in place for you. So then, finish the jobs, and I'm usually getting home around 7 o'clock. So I do 2 hours at night. So usually getting home around 7 o'clock, which gives me an hour before I'm supposed to stop eating again. And if you remember, I didn't start eating till 1 o'clock on the first day. So I had that extra hour if needed. Now, I have now got in place a meal that I have every evening. Every evening I have this meal, and I have not deviated from this meal for May, June, July, August, September, October, 6 months. 6 months I've been eating this same meal. So I'll get myself a lump of steak and I cut 8 ounces off it every night. Chop it up into cubes and I fry it in butter. There's no sunflower oil, there's no grapeseed oil, because all that stuff, it's just an industrial oil and it's so bad for you. So I either fry my steak in butter or coconut oil. High fat, and it's all pure, extra virgin bullshit, all that stuff. The stuff that when it goes in, your body's going, by hell, you're looking after me today. So I will fry up that steak in butter or coconut oil. Now in Japan, we have a thing called kimchi. It's Korean. You can find it wherever you're listening from, in America, in the UK, New Zealand, Australia. Kimchi's everywhere. Koreans are everywhere. Asians are everywhere. You will find this kimchi in your supermarket. Now, kimchi is a fermented cabbage with chili rubbed into it, and then it's put in an airtight tank and it's buried. If you go to Korea, they bury it and it ferments. Now, fermented food is so good for your guts. So good for your guts. It lowers the levels of cancer. It can make you live, if you look after yourself, it makes you live between 13 and 14% longer. So kimchi has been the way forward for me. So I've got my steak, I've got my kimchi, olives. Got the Mediterranean, I'll throw some olives in there. An avocado for the healthy fats, half an avocado chopped up in there. And then 2 eggs fried in the butter and the coconut oil that's left in the frying pan after I've cooked my steak. Fried. Put on top of all that stuff. Once it's on top, you break the yolks and you mix it all in. And there you have such a great bowl of food that fills you up. It's got your healthy fats, it's got your protein. So once that is in there, I will eat that off. And then you've got the juice from all that stuff at the bottom of your bowl once you've done. Now, rice is a thing. I know rice has had a bad rap over the last few years. They're putting it down as being as bad as bread. But I know a lot of you can only get rice from the supermarket. And this is where I will differ from, I would say, everybody that listens here. And the fact is that my father-in-law is a rice farmer. So every 3 weeks to a month, we get a big box of rice sent up from his house to our house. So I have rice. I'll throw the rice in. I'll mix it up with the juice that's left, all the butter, all the coconut oil, the yolks of the egg, the kimchi juice, the steak juice that's come out of that steak. And I'll mix it in with the rice and then dried seaweed. I will dip the dried seaweed in like it is a chapati, like you're eating your curry in a curry house. And I will eat it like that. And I know this sounds super healthy, and you're thinking to yourself, I don't think I could do that. That's just too much. But what you've got to remember is I have built up to this diet over many, many months. And it were all trial and error. So I'd be eating stuff thinking, yep, this is good for me. And I'd look at, no, I'll get shut of that and bring something else in. Get rid of that, bring something else in. So this is another piece of advice that I would bring to you, is the trial and error. What I've just told you there is what has worked for me. And what's good for the goose is not necessarily good for the gander. So you've got to work with the foods that work for you. Now, that was the 16-8. Like I said, that first day I did 17-7. So we're doing that for about a month, and that has now become second nature. Now, the thing is, at my work, I sometimes work afternoons as well, because I do a lot of research in the afternoons. But 2 days a week, you've got to do work in the afternoon where you cannot just be sat at your desk. You've got to be out there at the cliff face doing work, so you haven't got time to be eating. So what sometimes I would get to 4 o'clock and I've not been able to eat. And then I've got to cycle home. So you'd get at your desk at about 3:30 and I'd start eating then 2 days a week. So then my eating window went down to 4. So I was eating for 4 hours and I was having a 20-hour fast. Now, that became brutal at the start when I was doing that for 2-3 days a week. But your body gets used to it. In here, your brain gets used to it. So over that month of doing 3 days at 20 hours and 4 days at 17 hours, I gradually got every day down to 20 hours off, 4 hours on. And that worked for me. That really did work for me. So, why did you change it if it were working? Right. I've picked up extra private work in sushi. And it's come to a point where on the days at school, on the days at my job where I'm unable to eat until 4 o'clock, I decided not to eat then. Then I will come home, get my bag, and out I go. And I'm not getting back till 7. So then I've worked my way up to 23 hours fasting, 1 hour of eating. Now I did this for the first time about 3 weeks ago. So I had 1 hour, but I still had to eat the same amount of food that I would eat if I was fasting for 17 hours or 20 hours. I still had that window, but I still had to eat what I normally ate. So I did that, found it difficult. Maybe that's too much of a soft word, difficult. It were hard. It were quite brutal, actually. So I did 2 days of that back to back, and then went back to the 24, 20 off, 4 on. So 2 days a week I am doing 23 hours off, 1 hour on. Now, 7 days ago, last Sunday, I decided to try this for a week. The OMAD diet, the 1 meal a day diet. And this is what I found tough about it. And I thought because I could do it 2 days on the trot, I thought 7 would be fine. So, the 7-day, 1 meal a day fast diet, whatever you want to call it. Right, the first day I did it, yogurt and fruit, bananas, me steak and me olives, avocados and rice, and then another yogurt. This is what I'm usually eating during the day. Now, because my body's already used to that over a 4 and 7 hour window, you've got to think about getting all that in 1 hour. And that's where it gets difficult, because you're throwing a lot of food in very quickly. Now, you do, with a 23-hour fast, I wasn't getting irritable. And I think if I'd have been doing this in my 20s and 30s, I'd be getting pissed off with a lot of people. But because for some reason I'm in my early 50s, I've started to mellow out a bit. Not like me at all. So I wasn't getting irritable, but what I was doing is obsessing about food. I think about the third day in, at about 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning when I'm cycling to work, I had an irresistible urge to just stop off at a shop and just buy the worst food and plough through it. Just a hunger. But when I thought about it, when I carried on cycling and got to work, it had gone. So it wasn't a hunger. It was just my brain. It was just my brain saying we need to get some food in. It was just my brain. So I needed to overcome my brain, which for a person like me is not much to do. Not right big. But I was getting to that 1 hour feeding window, and then I were eating. Now, I was eating to a point where I was so full that I couldn't move because I were having to get all this food in 1 hour. And it's a lot of food. And you've got to pace yourself. You can't just throw it down as quickly as possible. You've got to try and break it up, but you've still got to get it in within that hour window. Now, another thing. In the morning, because I exercise in the morning, I get up early in the morning, I work in the morning. Every one of those 7 days in the morning, I was waking up with a pain right in the middle of my, is that your sternum? Just below the chest, just above the stomach. I think it's sternum. There, it felt as if all the food was stuck there. And it didn't feel right at all. So I'm getting up to exercise in the morning. I couldn't really exercise properly. I couldn't get the workout in with the kettlebell that I usually got in. So I found that terribly difficult. I wasn't going to the toilet as regularly as I was on the 20 off 4 on or 17 off 7 on. But when I did, it was a purge. A purge poo is apparently what they call them when you're doing this 23-1 fast. But that wasn't happening every 3 days that were happening. So over a 7-day period, I have only eaten 7 meals. And the reason why I will not be doing this OMAD diet anymore, and the only reason is the feeling that I was getting in the morning in my sternum. The fullness that I was feeling right below my chest and right above my stomach. It felt as if there was something there that wouldn't move. I don't know if it was the food, but the food should have already passed through my stomach and should be down in my lower intestine by then. But it felt as if there was something right there and it was uncomfortable. It stopped me training as hard as I could train and it just didn't sit well with me. But the fact that I know that I can do it, the fact that I took control and worked up towards it. I mean, you're working up towards eating. So it was just a case of me not eating for an extra 3 hours. Which you think, oh, well, that should be easy if your eating window is 4 hours. But you've got to get all that food in an hour, and that is uncomfortable. So you're eating less in that 1 hour because you can't get it all in because it's so uncomfortable. So if you're going to do this, work yourself up to it. Don't just go straight in at 23.1. If you are knocking on a bit, if you're pregnant, if you were just doing it to lose weight, don't bother. Start off at 16.8. Start off at 16.8. It's much easier at 16.8. Obviously, it's much easier. But you've got to get over that first hurdle first. Just to prove to yourself that you can do it. Do the 16.8 for 3 weeks, a month. Then if you think you can take it down, go 17, 18 and try that. If you want to try this OMAD diet and do 1 meal a day, knock yourself out. It works for some people. It doesn't work for me. It really doesn't work for me. So that is my 2 cents on this subject. I've tried it for 7 days. I may try it again when circumstances fall like that and I've got no chance to eat through the day. But I will not be doing it as a regular thing. I think I'll be going back to the 24 fast now. 20 off, 4 on. That seems to work for me. The 16.8 doesn't seem to be a challenge anymore. So I'll just be going back to the 20 off and 4 on. So that's that. I think this is episode 117. 117, the OMAD diet. 1 meal a day. Doesn't work for me, might work for you. It's good to be back in the studio again. It's not so good to be in the middle of autumn with winter just round the corner. But everybody who's listening, everybody who's watching, thank you very much. Again, the download numbers, I cannot thank you enough. So many people seem to enjoy listening to some middle-aged northerner banging on about this and that. I'll be here doing it, just to prove to myself I can do it. And if you're there listening, that's just a bonus for me. So keep subscribing, keep downloading, pass it on to your friends, and have a look on YouTube. And I'll see you all next week for another one of these. See you soon, everybody. Goodbye.